do the agglutination reactions, which are said to be better than precipitation reactions. Now first tell me, it's going to be a reaction of antigen and antibody, but which antigen? Soluble or particulate? Remember, P is not for P. Precipitation mein I did not have a particulate antigen, but here can I have a particulate antigen? Yes, I can. There are two tests, direct agglutination, indirect agglutination. I'll start from here. Direct agglutination, I'll show you one diagram. ये देखो, direct मतलब मैम direct, antigen है, antibody है, agglutinate करो, खत्म, direct. What is direct agglutination test? You have a particulate antigen, you add the antibody, हो गया agglutination. That is direct agglutination test. Either you can do it on a slide, or you can do it on a tube, or you can look at it under the microscope. If you do it on a slide, you must have seen वो जितना भी A blood group, B blood group वाला photos that I show you in pathology, they are all slide agglutination. So on the slide you are seeing अच्छा like over here A positive है, B positive. So you're doing it on a slide. That is slide agglutination. Tube agglutination will obviously happen in a test tube. What all comes? Can you tell me the names? Vidal test. Vidal test for what? For typhoid, of course. Okay, then what do you know the Weil-Felix test for? That is for rickettsia. What is the Paul Bunnell test for? It is for Epstein-Barr virus. What is this SAT and CAT? So now you will say that, ma'am, SAT and CAT are being done in a tube. So you told me, I'll tell you what is SAT and CAT. So you told me, okay, ma'am, ya to this will happen on a slide, or this is going to happen in a test tube, or you said there is a third version of it. Slide and test tube is okay. You said there is a third version that is going to happen in the microscope. So what is it, the third version? वो भी हमें बता दो. So the third version, that is microscopic agglutination testing, is going to be a mnemonic, or is going to be an example called MAT. So now you will obviously ask me, ma'am, what is this CAT, SAT, MAT that you're doing? Here you did SAT and CAT for tube agglutination. Here you're doing MAT for microscopic. So let me tell you, what is this CAT, SAT, MAT? पहले तो full form करो. Full form is cold, their agglutination tests. Na? So AT always has to stand for AT agglutination test. ठीक है, तो CAT is cold agglutination test. STAT is going to be standard agglutination test. And these are done in test tubes now, because M for microscopic agglutination test. This is the one that is done under a microscope. So simple. CAT sat on a mat. That is how I have learnt it. Why? CAT sat on a mat. Who is cat? Cat is my Billy. Cat is a Billy, right? So you will say these are for organisms, my Billy. Every time you get this question in the paper, you will say cat sat on a mat, and cat sat on a mat matlab you are talking about my Billy, means the cat is done for mycoplasma. Cold agglutination test is for mycoplasma. Standard agglutination test is done for brucella. And finally, the microscopic agglutination test is done for leptospira. And I remember just 48 hours before the NEET PG 2023, we had discussed it on the YouTube channel on Prep Ladder, and I remember this came up in the paper. We did the same mnemonic. The only one thing we discussed before the exam was this: cat sat on the mat, my Billy. So chalo, we said, chalo, let's go by gut feeling, and this came up in the paper. Of course, students were very, very excited. And this is a mnemonic which is tough. Examiner doesn't know हमने mnemonic बनाया है ना. Examiner is thinking they're all sounding the same. So let me confuse, but now we know the mnemonic, right? So cat sat on the mat, and that is mycoplasma, brucella, leptospira. And now you know what reaction are they? They are anyway, cat sat mat पे तो पता ही है they are agglutination reactions. You should be knowing microscopic wala to is obviously under the microscope, but the other ones are going to be tube agglutination. So slide mein there is only blood grouping. Microscopic mein there is only microscopic agglutination test. Everything comes under tube agglutination. So what? Vidal for typhoid, Weil-Felix for rickettsia, Paul Bunnell for EBV, cat, sat, mat sab ho gaya. Ab kya bacha? Coombs test. Okay, so what do you need to know about Coombs test? There is a direct Coombs test that you have, and there is an indirect Coombs test that you have. So please note, very commonly you will be doing this direct and indirect Coombs test obstetrics and gynecology. So for example, you have direct में तो कुछ ऐसा बिल्कुल direct होगा ना, 1, 2 खत्म, always a direct test. So what have you done? Let's assume I have taken the fetal blood sample over here, and I am saying the fetal cells are already coated with antibodies. The fetal cells are already coated with antibodies. Why? Because maybe this is a case of erythroblastosis fetalis. This is a case of erythroblastosis fetalis. So they say that the fetal RBCs are already coated with antibodies, but they are not agglutinating, they are incomplete antibodies. So you please add something. Coombs test में क्या add करोगे? Coombs reagent add karoge. You're always gonna add Coombs reagent. What is Coombs reagent? Anti-human globulin. You add anti-human globulin, so whatever gap was there in between them ना, वो anti-human globulin ने जाके पूरा gap ऐसे bridge कर दिया. So now will you be able to see that agglutination very, very easily? Yes, you will see an agglutination in this. So you will say this agglutination will only be seen if the fetal cells already had antibodies on their surface. Let's do a very, very quick recap. I'm talking about the direct Coombs over here. I have assumed that my fetus over here had erythroblastosis fetalis. So the fetal cells already had covered themselves with some antibodies while in utero. So when I have taken and added another antibody, so it has gone and bridged the gap. I have seen an agglutination. I will say DCT, direct Coombs test is positive. The fetus had antibodies. Now, if I want to do the indirect Coombs test I am doing when I want to find out whether the mother has antibodies in the serum. So over here, I have only taken antibody serum, matlab I have taken the mother's serum. I am assuming the mother has antibodies in her serum. You will say, ma'am, ab kaise karaye test? Antibody to hai. So now I will have to indirect hai na. I will have, where are the cells? पहले वाले में तो you took the cells, so you just had to add one antibody, direct था खत्म. यहाँ पर तो you've taken antibodies, so you will now add some test red blood cells also, and you will add the anti-human globulin also. So simple, in a direct Coombs test, all that you had to add was one anti-human globulin, khatam. But in an indirect Coombs test, because you have taken the serum, you will have to add the RBCs also and the anti-human globulin also. Then if by chance antibodies are there in the mother's serum, then all these things together will make an agglutination. So if you get an agglutination or you get an indirect Coombs test positive, that means the mother had antibodies in her serum. So if you want to detect the fetal antibodies, if you want to detect fetus ka problem, it is direct. If you want to test problems in the mother, that is going to be indirect. The same Coombs test you're also using for what? For autoimmune hemolytic anemias. Remember, I have told you in autoimmune hemolytic anemias in path also you do the Coombs test only. So these were all examples of your direct agglutination. Direct agglutination, ya to you did it in a slide or on a tube or on a microscope. Direct antigen liya, antibody liya, khatam. Provided the antigen was what? For agglutination reactions, P wala antigen, particulate antigen. What if you say, ma'am, I have a soluble antigen? Can you do an agglutination reaction? No, you will have to make it particulate. How will you make it particulate? First you make it particulate, then you do the reaction. So this is an indirect agglutination test. How do I make it particulate? So for indirect agglutination test, I will have to make that antigen to aise akele ghum raha tha, soluble antigen tha. If it is a soluble antigen, I will have to basically absorb it on either a red blood cell or I can even use latex particles. I will either use latex. So for example, if these are latex particles, all these antigens that you have, they are going to come and absorbed over here. So now it has become a particulate antigen. Now if it has become a particulate antigen, I just have to add an antibody and the reaction shall occur. So look at that slide. You have a soluble antigen. Pehle you stuck it onto some latex or something. Then you added an antibody and then you got a reaction. So simple. Direct में तो क्या था? Antibody, antigen, direct. चलो खत्म. But indirect में first you convert it into particulate and then you do the reaction. And one very important test is latex agglutination reaction. Latex agglutination test, for example, can be used for anti-streptolysine O antibodies. मतलब streptococcus infection के लिए we are doing latex agglutination testing. Okay with everyone, so your precipitation agglutination reactions are done. I know it's tough. One quick 2x की speed पर you will need a revision. That is a must.